Hello, friends. About 99% of friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did. Also, don't forget to press the like button and leave your comments. Your interaction makes the content reach everyone and helps the channel grow. Also, let me know in the comments from which country you are watching the video. I swear on my rig's last tank of diesel, what I'm about to tell y'all ain't no tall tale or campfire story. I lived it, breathed it, and barely crawled out with my sanity intact. It all started one dead silent night, somewhere along the loneliest stretch of Highway 85 between nowhere and hell. I was hauling a load of refrigerated meat out of Amarillo, Texas, running solo on an overnight shift, tired but wired on gas station coffee and classic country radio. The air was thick, not with humidity, but with something heavier, like the kind of pressure you feel before a tornado touches down, like nature's holding its breath. Now, I'd taken that route plenty of times before, but that night, something felt off the moment I rolled past the broken mile marker 213. The numbers had been scratched out, like someone didn't want folks knowing where they were. My CB radio crackled with static even though I hadn't touched the dial. Then came the smell, rotten eggs and burning rubber, but I hadn't blown a tire, and my reefer was running cold and clean. That smell, I'd come to learn later, was always the first sign. My headlights picked up a figure standing smack dab in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes so hard my coffee spilled all over my lap. The figure didn't flinch, just stood there, tall, thin, in a dirty white dress or gown, hair so long and black it covered their face. My heart punched my ribs like it was trying to get out. I laid on the horn, but the sound came out wrong, warped like it was underwater. And just as I was about to open the door and yell, the figure vanished. Not walked away, not ran, just disappeared into the mist that had suddenly rolled across the highway. I checked my mirrors, looked behind me. Hell, even climbed out with my flashlight and gave the area a once-over. Nothing. No footprints. No sound. Just that damn smell hanging in the air like it was glued there. I chalked it up to exhaustion. Got back in and kept driving, but I should have turned around right then and there. That was the start of it all. What followed over the next weeks, hell, the next few years, would turn my life inside out and make me question everything I thought I knew about this world and what might be crawling just beneath it. The next night, I took the same route, mostly 'cause I didn't want it to get into my head. Truckers don't got the luxury of fear. We run on tight schedules and tighter margins. Still, I couldn't shake the image of that figure from my mind. I kept telling myself it was a trick of the lights or a reflection on the windshield. Maybe even a weird hitchhiker with a flair for the dramatic. But deep down, my gut was twisting like an oil snake, and I should have listened to it. This time, I made a point to pass mile marker 213 before sunset. Sun was low on the horizon, turning everything gold and red like the world was bleeding. I cranked up the radio to drown out my nerves, but the static came back. Same as the night before, only worse. It screeched through the speakers so loud, I winced and shut it off. A couple miles later, the temperature in the cab dropped like I'd driven into a freezer. I checked the AC off. Heater off too. I pulled out my digital thermometer I used to monitor the reefer. Inside the truck was clocking at 33 degrees. No reason for that. Not in the middle of a Texas spring. Then came the lights. In my rear view, a pair of headlights flicked on out of nowhere. No engine sound, no tires on gravel, just bam, right behind me. Bright, high beams, too. I figured it was some jerk tailgating me, so I tapped the brakes to warn him off. No reaction. They stayed glued to me, way too close for comfort. I grabbed the CB and tried to call out, "Breaker, breaker, this is Dust Dog. Got a tailgater with no manners on 85. Anyone got eyes?" Static. Nothing but static. I watched the mirrors, heart thumping, hands sweaty on the wheel. Then, the lights did something I'll never forget. They lifted straight up into the air and hovered over my trailer. Like a helicopter, but dead silent. No blades, no wind, just those two beams shining down like judgment. I slowed to a crawl, my tires crunching over loose gravel on the shoulder, and suddenly, poof, the lights were gone, not turned off. Gone, like they were never there. I got out, pointed my flashlight up, scanned the sky. Black, just stars, no drone, no chopper, no explanation. That was when I heard it. Not outside the truck, but inside. A whisper, right behind me in the cab. I spun so fast I nearly twisted my ankle. "Who's there?" I shouted, already reaching for the crowbar behind my seat. No one. But the whisper came again, low and raspy, like it was coming from inside the dashboard. "Turn back," it said, clear as day. Turn back or burn. I felt cold fingers brush the back of my neck, and I swear I screamed like a scared little kid. I hit the gas and peeled out of there, tires throwing gravel, heart damn near exploding. The whisper didn't follow me, least not out loud, but I knew it was still there, like a shadow hanging over me, waiting. I didn't turn back. Should've, would've, if I'd known what was coming. I didn't sleep much after that. Parked at a truck stop just outside of Las Cruces, engine off, door locked, seat leaned back, but my eyes just wouldn't close. Every time I started to drift off, I'd feel something cold brush against my neck again, or hear the faintest whisper of "turn back" echoing in my ears. And it wasn't like I could just stop driving. Trucking's my livelihood. No miles, no money, and I wasn't about to let some ghost or hallucination or whatever the hell it was screw that up. But still, I switched my route the next night. Took an old, longer path through a bunch of back roads, mostly to avoid Highway 85. Thought maybe that stretch was cursed or just messing with my head. That detour took me through a section of desert I'd never really noticed before. No towns, no exits, just endless two-lane blacktop surrounded by scrub brush and nothing else. Felt like driving through the bottom of a dry ocean. You ever drive so far into nowhere that the stars start to look like eyes watching you from above? That's what it felt like. And then my GPS quit, just froze. Said recalculating, over and over again, but the screen never changed. Figured it was no big deal. I had a printed atlas in the glove box like any good old school trucker does. So I pulled over to check it, flicked on the dome light, and that's when I saw the handprint. It was smeared across my side window. Not a dusty handprint like someone outside had pressed their hand against the glass. No, this one was on the inside. 5 long, spindly fingers, too wide to be human, with streaks of moisture like it had been left by something cold and wet. I jumped out, heart racing, crowbar in hand, but there wasn't a soul in sight. Just silence. Even the crickets had stopped. I walked around the rig, checked under the trailer, peered into the trees off the road, but nothing. Just the wind and my own breath. So I climbed back in, locked the door, wiped that handprint off the inside of the glass with a towel, and kept going. A few miles down, I saw a diner light up ahead, neon sign flickering, open 24 HRS in red and blue. Looked like salvation, so I pulled in. Thing is, I didn't remember seeing that diner on the map. And the second I walked inside, everything felt wrong. The people didn't look right. I mean, they looked human, mostly. But their eyes were glassy, like doll eyes, and they didn't blink. Not once. The waitress, a tall blonde with a beehive hairdo straight out of 1962, asked, "Coffee?" without even moving her mouth. Just smiled with her lips frozen in place. I said sure and sat down at the counter, trying to act normal. The coffee was hot. Too hot. I took a sip and burned my tongue. And then I looked into the mug and saw my own face, not reflected, but inside the cup. My reflection blinked. I didn't. I dropped the cup and it shattered across the linoleum, coffee spilling like blood. Everyone in the diner turned to look at me, all at once. Same angle, same blank stare. I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't pay, didn't look back, just sprinted out the door and jumped into my cab like a man possessed. When I looked back in my mirror, the diner was gone. Just gone. Like it had never been there to begin with. Just darkness and desert again. I kept driving, sweat pouring down my back, hands shaking. I didn't stop again for hours. I didn't even breathe right until I saw the next set of headlights on the road. But even then, I wasn't sure anymore what was real and what wasn't. And worse, I'd started to hear the whisper again. Turn back, or burn. I kept thinking maybe I was just losing it. Maybe the lack of sleep, too much caffeine, and too many long hauls were catching up to me. I mean, I'd been on the road 12 years without much more than a week off here or there. It wears on you. Makes the shadows seem longer, the nights colder, the silence louder. But this was different. This wasn't just some tired brain playing tricks. Things were happening I couldn't explain, and they were following me no matter where I went. That night I rolled into a way station just outside Flagstaff. I figured being around people, inspectors, other drivers, whoever, might snap me back to reality. It was well lit, plenty of activity, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I went inside to use the restroom, splash some cold water on my face, and maybe grab a candy bar or something. While I was washing up, a guy in a blue coverall walked in, one of the station officers, I guess. He looked at me through the mirror, real still, and said, "You been down 85, haven't you?" I froze. I didn't say anything at first, just turned to face him. His eyes were bloodshot and glassy like he hadn't slept in weeks. "That stretch out past marker 213, he went on. "It's not just a road, it's a gate." I asked him what the hell he was talking about, and he just shook his head, wiped his hands on a paper towel and mumbled, "Don't stop, don't get out, don't talk to them." Then he walked out. I followed him right away, wanted answers, but when I stepped back into the main hall, he was gone, just vanished. I even asked the guy at the front desk if he'd seen him, got a blank stare in return. "I'm the only one working tonight," he said. I should have left then, but I was too wired, too confused. So I went back to my rig, sat in the cab, tried to steady my breathing. That's when I noticed something scribbled into the dust on my dashboard. I hadn't seen it before. 4 words. "They see you now." My skin crawled. I wiped it away fast, but my handprint left a perfect reverse outline, like whatever had written it was colder than ice and burned it into the grime. I started the engine and tore out of that way station like the devil himself was chomping at my back bumper. I didn't know where I was going, just away. I drove into the night, radio silent, GPS dead, every turn feeling like it was leading me deeper into some twisted maze I couldn't escape. The road looked normal enough, but I began to notice weird things. Telephone poles bent at odd angles, street signs that had no words, just symbols I didn't recognize, like scratch marks from some animal that never should have existed. And the stars, they were shifting. I swear to you, the sky itself was moving, like the constellations were being rearranged by an invisible hand. I passed another trucker, finally. Headlights on, cab lit up, and I pulled up alongside him to flash my lights, maybe call him on. The CB. But when I looked into his cab, I swear on my mother's grave, there was no driver, just the wheel turning itself, and something sitting in the passenger seat, leaning forward, smiling with rows of teeth too long for any mouth. I swerved, nearly jackknifed, heart hammering. That was no normal road. I'd crossed over somewhere, and whatever was out there, it wasn't done with me yet. After that, I stopped trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. No way. You don't imagine a faceless driver with a grinning hitchhiker made of teeth-sitting shotgun. You don't imagine a way station officer who knows what road you've been on and vanishes like smoke. Something had latched onto me from that cursed stretch past marker 213, and no matter how many back roads I took or how far I tried to outrun it, it stayed with me. I kept trucking, though, had a load to deliver to a distribution center in Barstow and figured if I just made it there, kept moving, maybe I could shake it. That night, I pulled over at a rest stop near the Arizona-California border, middle of nowhere. There were a few other rigs parked, some with their engines humming, others silent, drivers sleeping inside. I didn't plan to sleep, just needed a breather, maybe check the rig, make sure nothing was off. I climbed out, stretched my legs, and walked a slow circle around my truck. That's when I noticed my trailer door was unlatched. I know damn well I secured it. Triple checked it at the last fuel stop, but now it was hanging half open, just swaying gently in the wind. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight inside. The cargo was untouched, rows of boxed goods shrink-wrapped on pallets. But at the very back, tucked in the shadows, was a shape, small, crouched, like a child. I stepped in, slow. "Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You all right? You lost?" The shape shifted. I could hear its joints cracking. As it straightened up, just a little. Then I saw its eyes, glowing dull orange like embers buried in ash. I backed out quick, heart in my throat, slammed the trailer shut, and threw the lock back on, hand shaking. I stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. No movement. No sound. But I felt it. Whatever it was still inside my trailer, and I'd be damned if I was going to open it again. I jumped back in the cab, fired up the engine, and peeled out of that rest stop like hell was chomping at my heels. I drove straight through the night, eyes darting to my mirrors every few seconds, waiting for something to break free from the trailer or climb up onto the roof. But the thing is, it never did. That's what made it worse. The not knowing. Was it still there? Had it gotten out? Was it even real? I pulled into the Barstow Depot at dawn, my eyes red and scratchy, hands jittering. The dock worker waved me in, asked me how the haul went. I just nodded, didn't say a word. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to be done with it. I backed into the bay, signed the manifest, and walked away while they started unloading. Then I heard someone yell. I turned back just in time to see one of the dock guys stumble back from the trailer, falling flat on his ass, pale as a ghost. He looked at me with wide eyes and said, "What the hell was that?" I asked what he meant, already knowing the answer but praying I was wrong. He said he saw something crouched in the back corner, said it was whispering, said it looked straight at him and smiled, wide and slow, before vanishing into thin air. The manager brushed it off, said it was probably a rat or a shadow, told everyone to get back to work. But the dock guy didn't move. He just sat there, shaking, eyes glued to the inside of that trailer. I walked away and didn't look back. I'd delivered the cargo, sure, but I'd also delivered something else. Something that didn't belong on any highway, and definitely not in this world. I should have taken some time off right then. Parked the rig, turned in the keys, and given myself a month to clear my head. But truckers don't get paid to rest. Miles are money, and I had bills to cover. So I picked up my next load in Bakersfield 2 days later, headed north up through Oregon, delivering auto parts to a place outside Eugene. I told myself I'd stay away from any stretch of road that felt even a little off. No shortcuts, no scenic routes, no. It'll save you 20 minutes nonsense. Just highways I knew like the back of my hand. That first day went smooth. I drove past Modesto, over the mountains, and stopped near Redding for some shut-eye. Parked at a quiet little truck stop with good lighting and security cameras, figuring I'd finally get a solid night's rest. I cracked the window just a little for air, turned on the fan, and reclined my seat. I was just starting to doze off when I heard it again, whistling, real low, real slow. Just a few notes, but they were the same ones I'd heard weeks ago out near marker 213. My eyes snapped open, heart already beating like a war drum. I sat up, scanned the lot. Only a couple of trucks nearby. Lights on in the convenience store, a guy fueling up his pickup at the far pump. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the whistling was still there, closer now, right outside my window. I reached for my flashlight, flipped it on, and aimed it out into the night. For a second, I saw nothing, just the reflection of my light in the side mirror. But then, just behind my trailer, a shadow moved. Not fast. Just a slow, deliberate shift, like someone sliding sideways along the edge of the rig. I killed the light, heart pounding, and quietly unlocked my door. Slid, out with my boots barely touching the pavement. I crept around the side of the truck, staying low, breathing through my teeth. But when I rounded the back, there was nothing there. Just me, the trailer, and a slight breeze rustling some trash near the curb. But I knew I'd seen something. I knew I'd heard that whistle. So I opened the back of the trailer, slow and careful, ready for anything. And it was empty, completely. This load wasn't scheduled to be picked up until the next morning, so I had nothing in the back but darkness and the echo of my own doubts. I locked it again, climbed back into the cab, and this time, I didn't try to sleep. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, engine off, listening. That's when I felt it. My seat shifted, just slightly, like someone behind me had leaned forward. I didn't dare look in the mirror. I didn't move. My mouth went dry. The pressure grew stronger. It was like breath on the back of my neck. Then, so soft I almost thought I imagined it, a voice whispered right behind my ear, "Why didn't you stay on the road?" I spun around fast, nearly ripped the seat out of the floor, but there was no one there. Just the empty sleeper, curtains, still drawn. I grabbed my keys, fired up the rig, and got the hell out of there without even checking my mirrors. That drive up to Eugene was the longest run of my life. Not because of traffic or weather, but because I knew, without a doubt, I wasn't alone in that cab. Something had climbed in with me, and it didn't plan on getting out anytime soon. ChatGPT said, by the time I made it to Eugene, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely sign the delivery slip. I didn't tell the guy at the dock what was going on. Hell, what could I say? "Hey, I think there's a ghost riding shotgun?" I knew how that'd go. They'd mark me as unstable, maybe take away my license. And if I couldn't drive, I couldn't make a living. So I kept my mouth shut, nodded through the delivery, and pulled off to a rest area just west of town where I could finally try and figure out what the hell was happening to me. It wasn't just the voices or the shadows, or even that thing in the trailer anymore. It was the road itself. I swear to you, every time I took a turn, I felt like the highway was twisting around me. Like the world behind me didn't match the one in front. I sat in my cab, engine off, everything quiet. I watched a crow land on a signpost not far off, just watching me like it knew something. And that's when I decided I needed to talk. To somebody. Somebody who'd been around the block, seen strange things out on the highway. So I pulled out my logbook and flipped through some old contacts. There was this guy I used to run loads with back in Texas, Ricky Blue Dog Martinez. Retired now, but he used to tell stories that'd make your hair stand up. I dialed his number, not even sure if it'd still work. But after a couple rings, I heard that gravelly voice pick up. "Who the hell's calling me this early?" I told him it was me, laid it out straight. Told him about the whistling, the empty trailer, the voice in the cab. He went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You've been down past 213, haven't you?" My mouth went dry. "Yeah," I told him. "A few weeks ago." He sighed. "I told you boys never to take that route at night. That stretch of road, it's older than you think. Older than asphalt. Built on something that didn't want it there. I went through it once back in '94. Saw things I ain't never been able to forget." I asked him what he saw, but he just muttered, "It ain't what you see, it's what sees you." He told me the road was cursed, tied to a place folks used to call the Hollow Mile, long before highways were even laid. Said people disappear, out there. Not just truckers, families, cops, surveyors. Gone. Like they never existed. He warned me not to go back, not even to try to retrace my steps. "Whatever followed you off that road," he said, "don't want to go back. It's riding with you now." I hung up, heart hammering like a freight train, and looked into my rearview mirror. Nothing there, but I felt it. That cold pressure on my shoulder. Like fingers pressing down, not to hurt me, just to remind me they were there. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. And I sure as hell didn't stop driving. I figured if I stayed in motion, maybe I could outrun it, or at least stay ahead long enough to figure out what it wanted. I kept the wheels turning for 3 straight days after that call with Blue Dog. Barely stopped to piss, only fueled up when I absolutely had to. Every time I shut off the engine, the silence got louder, if that makes any sense. Like something was waiting for the hum of the motor to die so it could breathe down my neck again. I started seeing things just outside the edge of my headlights. Shapes that didn't move like animals, didn't look like people either. Real tall, stick-thin things with heads that leaned too far to one side, like they were listening for something deep underground. But when I'd slam the brakes and jump out to check, there'd be nothing. No tracks, no wind, just the smell of hot metal and something sour, like rotted wood left out in the rain. It got worse the night I took a job hauling a load from Medford to Reno. I didn't have much of a choice. It was good money, and the dispatcher didn't exactly give me time to be picky. The route hugged the hills and wound through valleys that the GPS didn't even want to show clearly. Half the trip I was off-grid. No cell reception, no radio, just the sound of tires on cracked pavement and my own heartbeat for company. I was halfway through the mountain pass when the fog rolled in. Not that light, wispy kind that just hugs the road. No, this stuff was thick and yellowish, like somebody poured smoke into the valley. My high beams couldn't even cut through it. Felt like the world just ended 10 feet in front of my hood. That's when I saw her. A woman in a white dress standing right in the middle of the damn road. I yanked the wheel hard, barely missed her, the trailer swinging wide enough to knock gravel off the shoulder. My heart damn near burst through my chest. I pulled the rig to a stop, tires screaming, jumped out with my flashlight, shouting, "Lady, you all right? You trying to get yourself killed?" But she was gone. Completely. Not a single footprint, just that fog, curling and twisting like it was watching me back. And then, as I stood there with my light sweeping the trees, I heard laughter. Not hysterical or loud, just soft and slow, almost polite, like someone was amused I'd stopped. It echoed all around me, too smooth to pin down. And then came the whisper, "You're on the road now." I turned, fast, ran back to the cab and slammed the door shut, locking it without thinking. My hands were icy, my breath fogged up the glass from the inside. I didn't wait. I fired up the engine, put her in gear, and got moving. Fog or no fog. I drove blind for miles, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me in the real world. I didn't stop until I hit the outskirts of Reno just after dawn, the sun finally breaking through and chasing the mist away. But even in the daylight, I couldn't shake the feeling that the road had shifted under me somehow. Like I hadn't made it out of those mountains entirely, like part of me never left. ChatGPT said, I tried to convince myself that maybe I was just overworked. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me from too many hours behind the wheel without rest. So I checked into a cheap motel just off I-80 on the east side of Reno. Place had one of those flickering neon signs and carpets that hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. But at that point, I didn't care. I needed a shower, I needed a bed, and most of all, I needed to stop feeling like there was something sitting just behind me every time I closed my eyes. I scrubbed off 3 days of road grime, sank into the creaky mattress, and tried to convince myself I was finally safe. But sleep didn't come easy, not because of noise or discomfort, no. It was the dream. Except it didn't feel like a dream. I was driving again, same rig, same trailer, but the world outside the windshield was pitch black. No stars, no road, no nothing. Just this endless stretch of blackness where my headlights couldn't touch a thing. Then suddenly the CB radio crackled to life. Static at first, then a voice, deep and wet, like it was speaking through water. It said, "The road ends behind you." Then laughter, real slow and hollow. The kind that rattles your bones even though you're not sure why. And then, through that darkness, I saw lights. Not headlights, but lanterns. Flickering, floating, like a procession of people holding fire through the trees. I couldn't move, couldn't steer. My hands were locked on the wheel. And then I saw her again, the woman in white right in front of me. But this time her face wasn't human. It was stretched too long, mouth open wide in a scream I couldn't hear. Her eyes were just pits, black holes pulling at me. I woke up gasping so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. Sat up, drenched in sweat, and there were handprints on the inside of my windshield, not mine. Too small, like a child's. And they were sliding upward like someone had been trying to climb out through the glass. I staggered outside, barely, able to breathe. The sun was rising, birds singing, traffic humming by on the freeway. But my truck? Still locked, still sealed. No broken windows, no sign anyone had gotten in. But those prints? They faded slow, like fog on a mirror. And by the time I dared to open the cab again, they were gone. Not a trace. I left that motel without even checking out. Just hit the road again, engine screaming like it knew I shouldn't be there. I didn't even take a load. Just drove. Anywhere, nowhere, didn't matter. I just needed distance between me and whatever was trailing me. But it didn't matter. You see, once you see the road behind the road, the one that ain't mapped, the one that ain't paved, you can't unsee it, and worse than that, it sees you back. I must have driven 1,000 miles over the next couple of days, just crisscrossing the western states with no destination, no freight, no schedule, just me and that big diesel heartbeat thumping under. The hood, like it was the only thing holding me in place. I stopped looking at signs. Didn't care if I was in Utah, Arizona, or back in Nevada. All I knew was that every time I glanced in the mirror, something was there. Not clear, not obvious, but just wrong enough. A shimmer in the sleeper, a flash of white like a dress, a pair of black, hollow eyes staring right through the glass. It never showed up long enough to confront. Just little reminders, like it was letting me know it hadn't gone anywhere. And then, out near a place called Ely, middle of nowhere, stretch of desert where the sky goes on forever, and the road turns to glass when the sun hits it right. I pulled over at a truck stop that looked like it hadn't seen a customer since the Clinton administration. Dust-covered pumps, cracked pavement, one flickering sign that just said open, though I doubted it. I was bone-tired and running on fumes, both gas and soul, so I parked, got out, and stepped inside. The bell over the door didn't ring, didn't even make a sound. The place was dim, shelves mostly empty, and behind the counter stood an old man with skin like leather and eyes that didn't blink. He looked at me, nodded once, and said, "You've been driving the old road, haven't you?" I froze, didn't even respond. He pointed toward the back wall where there was a map, old and faded like someone had drawn it by hand. I walked over, not sure why. And that's when I saw it. Etched faint in pencil, almost erased with time, a stretch of highway that didn't exist on any GPS. It looped down through parts of Nevada, cut across a section of desert that wasn't marked by any state line, and curled right through where I'd driven that first night past marker 213. The old man shuffled up beside me, said, "That road's older than the rocks, son. Older than the trees. Ain't built by no man either. Folks think they paved over it, but you can't pave over something that ain't ever been buried." I turned to ask him how he knew all this, but he was already walking back behind the counter. He pulled out a dusty old thermos and poured 2 shots of black coffee, so thick it might have been oil. "You don't stop driving that road," he said, "until it takes you someplace you can't come back from." I asked him what he meant, but all he said was, "You'll know when you see the sign." I left without buying nothing. Didn't feel like a place where money mattered anyway. But the moment I pulled back out on the road, I realized what he meant. The mile markers had changed. They weren't numbers anymore. They were symbols, runes or something. And worse, my odometer started moving backwards. I slammed my foot down harder than I ever had before, but the truck just seemed to sink deeper into that cursed stretch of road, like the highway itself was trying to pull me under. The symbols on the mile markers weren't just random scratches, they were warnings. Ancient, angry carvings meant to keep folks away, but somehow they'd been forgotten, buried under layers of asphalt and time. The odometer ticked backward like a heartbeat in reverse, each mile rolling back into the past, and the radio crackled, again with that same watery voice whispering, "You're running out of time." I didn't know what time it meant, my life, my soul, my sanity, but I knew I was running on borrowed luck. The sun dipped below the horizon faster than usual, swallowing the sky whole, and the truck's headlights started to flicker like a candle in a storm. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw shapes moving alongside the road, shadowy figures that flickered in and out like they were trapped between worlds. They weren't people, not really. Their limbs stretched and twisted like burnt branches, and their eyes glowed faintly, blue and cold. I tried to shake my head, tell myself it was just fatigue, but deep down I knew better. I was inside a nightmare that wasn't mine to wake from. Then, out of the darkness, the woman appeared again. This time standing on the hood of my rig, her white dress glowing faintly in the headlights, her face a mask of sorrow and rage. She reached out a hand toward me, her fingers long and spindly like cracks in old porcelain. I swerved hard, but the truck wouldn't respond, as if it was tied to her by invisible chains. The radio screamed with static and those cruel whispers, "Come with us. Stay with us." The air turned icy, my breath visible in thick clouds inside the cab. My heart thundered, pounding so loud I thought it would burst through my chest. Then, everything went black. When I came to, I was parked on the shoulder of the highway, engine running, dawn breaking slow and weak over the horizon. The woman was gone. The shadow figures disappeared into the trees. The symbols on the mile markers had changed back to numbers, regular numbers. My odometer was finally moving forward again. I didn't know how long I'd been out, or if it had all been a hallucination, but my hands were shaking, and my soul felt heavier than it ever had before. I started the truck, hands trembling as I pulled back onto the road, eyes scanning every shadow, every curve. I swore to myself I'd never drive that stretch again. But the road, it has a way of calling you back, like a hunger, a curse that's hard to shake once it finds you. And I think it's still with me, running alongside me every mile, whispering in the dark. So if you're out there on the highway, driving through the night, watch those shadows. Listen for the whistling, and whatever you do, don't follow the road that no map shows. Because sometimes, the scariest things aren't the monsters you see. They're the ones you don't. There's a weird truth about being a trucker that most folks don't get. The highway is not just a strip of asphalt stretching from point A to point B. It's alive. It breathes. It remembers. You can drive 1,000,000 miles and never see the same road twice because it shifts and changes in ways you can't explain. That cursed stretch, what Blue Dog called the hollow mile, it's like the highway's wound around something ancient, something hungry, and every time you drive it, you stir it awake. I learned that the hard way. After that night with the woman in white, after the symbols and the backward miles, I started keeping notes in my logbook. Little things I saw, sounds I heard, how the road felt under my tires. It was like keeping a diary for a ghost I couldn't shake. One night, weeks later, I was running a load from Boise down to Sacramento, cruising the I-84 when the sun dipped below the mountains and shadows stretched across the valley. I was tired but felt restless, like something was tugging at me from the dark. That's when the radio popped again. Not the usual crackle, but clear, calm. A voice, low and steady, said, "Turn off at exit 45, find the red truck." Rubbed my eyes, thought I'd gone crazy. But the voice came again, just as calm. "Turn off at exit 45. Find the red truck." I pulled off the freeway, heart pounding so hard I thought it'd blow the speakers out. Exit 45 was a rundown rest area, half overgrown with weeds and rusted-out signs. The parking lot was empty, save one vehicle, a bright red pickup, old and battered, but somehow gleaming under the moonlight. I stepped out of my rig, the silence thick as fog. No sound but my boots crunching gravel. I walked toward the truck, but the closer I got, the colder the air became. I swear I could see my breath in the dark. Suddenly, a figure appeared beside the red truck. Tall, wearing a faded denim jacket, face hidden under a cap pulled low. He didn't speak, just nodded toward the passenger door. I hesitated but opened it. Inside was a small box, wooden, carved with those same strange runes I'd seen on the mile markers. I reached in, the wood cold and rough under my fingers. The moment I touched it, a chill ran down my spine like electricity. The figure vanished. I got back in my cab, heart racing, the box on the passenger seat next to me. I couldn't open it, not yet. Something told me I needed to keep it safe. The radio was dead silent, no crackles, no whispers, just the hum of the engine and the endless road ahead. That night, as I drove through the dark, I realized I wasn't just running from the road anymore. I was running toward something. Something I didn't understand yet, but knew was tied to that cursed highway. And maybe, just maybe to me. The box sat on the dashboard, its carved runes catching the faint glow from the truck's instrument panel. I kept glancing over at it, half expecting it to move or whisper, but it stayed still, silent and ominous like some ancient relic. I didn't know what it was, but I had a feeling it wasn't meant for me. More like I'd been chosen to carry it whether I liked it or not. I ran my fingers over the edges, feeling a strange warmth that pulsed like a heartbeat. The rest of the trip was restless. Every time I looked in the mirror, the woman in white was there. Just for a second, fading, like a mirage. Shadows crawled along the edges of my vision, and the radio started crackling again. But this time the whispers weren't threatening. They were pleading. "Help us," they said. "Free us." The voices weren't one or two, but dozens, layered like a choir of lost souls. It was haunting, but not entirely evil. More like trapped, desperate. I finally stopped at a diner just outside Sacramento, the kind with neon signs buzzing and coffee that tastes like burnt rubber. I sat at the counter staring at that box. An old woman behind the register noticed me looking. "You carrying something heavy, son?" she asked, her voice gravelly but kind. I nodded, hesitated, then told her a little about the road, the woman, the whispers. She didn't blink, just reached under the counter and pulled out an old, faded journal. "This might help," she said, sliding it across to me. The pages were yellowed and fragile, filled with handwriting that looked like it belonged to a long-dead trucker. Stories about the Hollow Mile, the red truck, and a curse tied to an ancient burial ground beneath the road. The journal talked about souls trapped between worlds, cursed to wander the highway until someone could break the cycle. I spent hours reading, the diner closing around me until it was just me, the journal, and that cursed box. The more I read, the more I realized I wasn't alone in this. Others had seen the woman, the symbols, the backward miles. Others had carried that box, trying to free the trapped souls, and none had succeeded. The journal ended with a warning. The road tests the living. It demands sacrifice. Only the brave, or the damned, can break its hold. I closed the book, heart pounding. I wasn't sure if I was brave or damned, but I knew one thing. This road wasn't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the road was watching, waiting, breathing, just beyond the truck's windows. The box sat heavy on the passenger seat, like it was weighing down my soul. I tried to get some shut-eye, but every time I closed my eyes, I was back on that dark highway, headlights cutting through the void, The woman in white just ahead, her face twisted in silent sorrow. The whispers flooded my mind, swirling in the quiet. Help us. Free us. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to be just another lost soul trapped in the endless night. I needed answers, and if that journal was right, the key to breaking the curse was buried deep under the road itself. I headed out of Sacramento, aiming for the spot marked in the journal, a place the locals called the Devil's Crossing, where the highway twisted over an old burial ground hidden beneath layers of asphalt and time. The closer I got, the heavier the air became. The radio went dead silent, no static, no voices, just a cold emptiness. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that reached out like fingers. As I crossed the bridge over a dry riverbed, my headlights caught something on the guardrail. An old rusted chain wrapped tight around a wooden post with faded ribbons fluttering in the wind. I got out to look closer. The ribbons were tattered, but I could just make out names scrawled in faded ink. Names of drivers who'd disappeared along this stretch. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I knew then the road wasn't just haunted. It was hungry. Hungry for those who dared to drive its cursed path. The box on the seat seemed to pulse with energy, like it was alive, like it was waiting for me to do something. I dug into my bag, pulled out the journal, and read the final ritual. One that said I had to bury the box beneath the soil of the old burial ground to set the souls free. Heart pounding, I climbed down into the riverbed where the earth was cracked and dry. I dug with my bare hands, sweat and dirt mixing, until I hit something hard. The ground felt wrong here, like it was a thin veil between worlds. I buried the box deep, whispering the words from the journal, my voice shaky but steady. The moment I covered it with dirt, the air shifted. The sky brightened, the shadows retreated, and for the first time in weeks, the road felt quiet. I looked up and saw a flicker of white in the distance. Her, the woman in white, but her face was peaceful now, no longer twisted in sorrow or rage. She nodded once, then faded away like morning mist. I climbed back into my rig. The highway stretched out before me, open and free. The whispers were gone. The symbols on the mile markers were back to numbers, and the road felt like home again. I knew the curse wasn't completely gone. Some things like this never fully leave. But I'd done my part. I'd faced the darkness, carried the weight, and maybe, just maybe, I'd freed a few souls along the way. So if you're out there, driving the lonely highways, keep your eyes open and your heart steady. Sometimes the scariest stories aren't just tales, they're real. And the road? Well, it's got a way of telling them to you when you least expect it. Drive safe out there. The silence that followed felt different, heavier somehow, not empty but full, like the road itself was exhaling after holding its breath for years. As I rolled forward, the hum of the engine was steady, comforting, and for once, the night sky wasn't just a black void, but a vast canvas of stars sparkling above, as if the universe itself was watching over me. I thought about all the truckers who'd come before me, those names on the ribbons, those lost souls whose stories never made the headlines but were etched forever in the highway's dark memory. Maybe they were finally at rest. But the road has a strange way of messing with your mind, especially when you've been close to its darker corners. Days later, I found myself back behind the wheel, roots and loads pulling me back into the rhythm of the highway. At times, late at night, I'd catch a glimpse in the side mirror, a flash of white, a shadow slipping just beyond the headlights. I'd grip the wheel tight, reminding myself that some ghosts are just memories, that the highway carries all sorts of stories, some true, some twisted by fear and time. Still, I know better than to ignore those signs completely. The highway's alive, like a restless beast beneath the asphalt, and it remembers. It knows your name, your fears, your secrets, but it also listens. Maybe that's why I'm still here, telling this story to you. Maybe because when the road whispers, you gotta answer. even if it's just to say you survived. So if you're ever out there, alone on a dark stretch, and you hear the whispers on the wind or see a flicker of white out of the corner of your eye, don't turn away. Don't speed up. Listen, because sometimes the scariest part of the highway isn't what's in front of you, it's what's following behind. Drive safe, friends, and keep your lights on. ChatGPT said, one night, after that whole ordeal with the box and the woman in white, I thought maybe I'd seen the worst the road could throw at me. But the highway has a way of digging deeper than you expect, especially when you think you're safe. I was hauling freight down an old stretch of highway out near the desert, a place the locals call Devil's Backbone, because the road twists and crests like a jagged spine. The sun had just set, and the sky was a deep purple, stars beginning to prick through the fading light. I was feeling that familiar itch in my gut, the one that says, watch out, something's coming. The truck's radio buzzed to life, and that old scratchy voice I'd heard before whispered my name like it was right there in the cab with me. Keep your eyes open, it said. They're near. I scanned the dark horizon but saw nothing except the endless ribbon of road. That's when I noticed the headlights behind me. Not one set, but three, all riding my tail like vultures circling a dying animal. I pulled over, thinking maybe they'd pass, but those trucks didn't slow. They stayed right there, engines growling, lights burning holes through my rearview mirror. I stepped out, heart pounding like a jackhammer, and that's when I saw them. Figures emerging from the desert shadows, tall and gaunt with faces hidden beneath dusty hats and scarves wrapped tight around their necks. Their eyes gleamed, reflecting the truck's lights like coals in a fire. They didn't say a word, just moved closer in silence. I felt the temperature drop fast, frost creeping along the edges of the cab's door. I scrambled back in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The trucks behind roared back to life, headlights blazing as they followed. I floored it, gripped tight on the wheel, trying to shake them on the winding road. But every turn seemed to bring them closer, their shapes blending with the night like shadows born of smoke. My breath came in ragged gasps, the radio now a static storm of voices chanting in a language I didn't understand. Suddenly, the road ahead split into two paths, one paved and lit, the other a dirt trail disappearing into a thicket of twisted trees. The voice on the radio returned, clearer than ever. Choose wisely, it said. I swerved onto the dirt trail without hesitation, tires crunching on dry earth. The trucks vanished behind me, swallowed by the night. The dirt path led to a clearing, moonlight pouring down on a circle of stones carved with symbols I'd seen before. In the center lay a rusted, broken sign reading, Lost Souls Crossing. I didn't want to get out, but something pulled me forward. Curiosity, or maybe fate. As I stepped into the circle, the whispers grew louder, surrounding me like a cold wind. The desert figures appeared at the edges, their faces still hidden, but I could feel their eyes piercing right through me. I realized then the highway wasn't just a road. It was a battleground between the living and the lost, and I'd been dragged into the middle. I knew I had to find a way out, or become one of the lost souls trapped forever, chasing the endless highway into darkness. The desert. Wind picked up, swirling dust and dry leaves around the circle of stones, and that cold whispering filled the air like a chorus of shadows. I stood frozen, heart hammering, eyes darting between those ghostly figures and the broken sign that marked the lost souls crossing. The runes carved into the stones glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat synced with the pounding in my chest. I felt a pull, as if the ground beneath me was breathing, alive, hungry for something more than just a passing traveler. Then I heard it, the low scrape of metal on stone, slow and deliberate. My gaze snapped to the edge of the clearing, where an old rusted truck sat half buried in sand. Its cab door creaked open, though no one was behind the wheel. A chill ran through me as I realized the license plate was cracked and faded, but I could just make out the words, Fate. The whispering grew louder, turning into anguished voices crying out for release. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted to the earth. The ghostly figures stepped closer, their faces now visible beneath the scarves, hollow eyes, pale skin, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones, mouths silently mouthing words I couldn't hear. One reached out a hand, gnarled and trembling, as if begging for help. My breath caught, and without thinking, I reached into my jacket and grabbed the box, the same box I'd buried near the Devil's Crossing. The moment I held it, the whispers turned to a roar. The ground trembled beneath my feet, dust swirling in a cyclone around me. The figures closed in, but instead of fear, a strange calm washed over me. I spoke the words from the journal once more, the ancient language rolling off my tongue like a forgotten prayer. The box pulsed in my hand, then shattered, releasing a blinding light that shot into the sky. When the light faded, the figures were gone, replaced by silence and stillness. The stone's glow dimmed, the air grew warm, and the desert night felt alive in a good way. I felt weight lift from my chest, a peace I hadn't known since the start of this nightmare. I climbed back into my truck, eyes still wide from what I'd witnessed. The road ahead was clear, no shadowy figures trailing me, no whispers on the wind. The radio was silent, but this time, it felt like a blessing. Driving away from that cursed place, I realized the highway's horror isn't just about ghosts or curses. It's about the stories we carry, the burdens we bear, and the courage to face what hides in the dark. That night changed me. It reminded me that sometimes the scariest road is the one you have to travel inside your own mind. So here I am, sharing this with you, hoping it helps someone out there understand. No matter how dark the highway gets. You don't have to drive it alone. ChatGPT said, after that night in the desert, things on the road changed, but not in the way I expected. The shadows didn't just vanish completely, they lingered, like old scars that never fully heal. Some nights, when I was miles from any town or city, I'd catch that faint glimmer of white just beyond my headlights, or hear soft whispers carried on the wind through the cab vents. But now, those signs felt different, not threats, but warnings, like the highway was telling me to be careful, to respect the thin line between this world and whatever's beyond. One trip, I was hauling a load through the Appalachian Mountains, a stretch of road infamous for its tight curves and heavy fog. It was late, and the fog had rolled in thick as soup, swallowing the headlights and turning the world into a gray blur. I was inching along, careful not to lose control, when the radio crackled to life with that same eerie static and faint whispering I'd heard before. But this time, it wasn't a voice I recognized. It was a song, an old folk tune, slow and haunting, the kind your grandma might hum while rocking on her porch, but with an undertone that made your skin crawl. Suddenly a figure appeared on the side of the road, a man dressed in faded overalls and a worn hat, holding a lantern that cast a dim, flickering light. He looked right at me, his eyes hollow and glassy. I blinked, and when I looked again, he was gone. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing, and peered into the fog, but there was nothing but the swirling mist and the trees standing like silent sentinels. That night, I realized the highway isn't just haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by history. By lives that ended suddenly, violently, or mysteriously. Those lost souls don't just vanish. They linger, tied to the places where their stories ended. Sometimes they reach out, not to harm, but to be remembered, to warn the living. And sometimes they show up just to say, I was here. Driving. Through those mountains, I felt a deep connection to those lost souls. The road wasn't just a stretch of asphalt. It was a living memorial, a thread weaving the past and present together. And for all its terror, the highway had a strange kind of respect for those of us who keep moving forward, who honor the stories etched into its winding path. So when you find yourself alone on a foggy mountain road, or rolling down a lonely stretch of desert highway, keep your eyes open and your heart steady. Because the highway stories aren't just scary tales, they're the echoes of lives that refuse to be forgotten. There was a time I found myself driving through the deep south, a stretch of highway locals called the Devil's Hollow. The name alone sent chills down my spine even before I hit the road. But that night, I had no choice. Deadlines and deliveries waited for no one. The air was thick with humidity, making the sweat on my brow feel sticky and uncomfortable inside the cab. The highway itself was narrow, twisting through dense woods where moonlight barely reached the asphalt. I was on edge from the start. About an hour in, the truck's headlights caught something strange, a figure standing just off the shoulder, waving me down. I slowed, expecting some poor soul needing help, but as I pulled over, the figure vanished, into the woods like smoke. I rubbed my eyes, chalked it up to heat exhaustion, and moved on. But as the night deepened, things got worse. The radio flickered on and off, spitting out bursts of static and eerie music that sounded like it was coming from another time. Then the air inside the cab grew cold, despite the humid night outside. My breath fogged the windows, and I could see the outline of a woman in an old-fashioned dress standing beside my truck. She didn't move or speak, just stared with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. I told myself it was all in my head, a trick of the long hours and isolation. But every time I glanced over, she was still there, unmoving, a ghost frozen in time. The truck seemed to slow, like the road itself was trying to hold me back, and I felt hands brush my shoulder, cold, clammy fingers that made me jerk away and slam the door shut. I punched the accelerator, desperate to get away from whatever haunted that stretch of Devil's Hollow. But the woman's voice followed me, a soft, sorrowful whisper that said, "Stay forever." I made it out of those woods alive, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can still hear her whispering through the radio static, a reminder that some highways carry more than just travelers. They carry the weight of restless souls who never found their way home. So if you ever find yourself driving down Devil's Hollow, keep your windows rolled up tight and your eyes peeled. Sometimes the road's most terrifying stories aren't about what you see, but what you don't. ChatGPT said, "I'll keep going with the story. Here's what happened next, driving down that stretch called Devil's Hollow." After the encounter with that ghostly woman, I figured I'd learned my lesson about late-night hauls through cursed woods. But the highway, as always, had a different plan. A few weeks later, I was hauling a load of refrigerated goods, and the GPS sent me through a shortcut, an old forgotten back road that wasn't even on most maps anymore. The kind of road that makes you question if you should have taken the long way around. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when I pulled onto the gravel path. Tall trees leaned over the road like they were whispering secrets, their branches scratching the windshield like fingernails. The air smelled different. Here, damp, earthy, like something had been buried and forgotten beneath the soil. About 20 minutes in, my headlights caught a pair of eyes reflecting back at me from the ditch. A pair of yellow, glowing, wild eyes staring straight at me. I hit the brakes, heart pounding, but when I swung the truck to the side, the eyes vanished. I told myself it was a coyote or maybe a raccoon, but the feeling in my gut screamed otherwise. As I continued, the radio started crackling with static again, and for a moment I thought I heard laughter mixed with the static, low, sinister, and echoing. The road twisted tighter, and suddenly the GPS blinked out, replaced by a blank screen. No signal, no maps, nothing but the dark road ahead and the trees closing in like walls. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Figures standing silently along the roadside, barely visible in the dark. Not human, but something else. They didn't step forward or call out, just watched as I passed by, their faces obscured by shadows. My hands clenched the wheel tighter, sweat trickling down my neck. Suddenly, the truck's engine sputtered and died, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. The radio burst to life with that same chilling voice I'd heard before, whispering my name, repeating over and over, "Stay with us." Panic set in as I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The cold night air hit me like a wall, and the silence was broken only by the rustling of leaves and distant howls. I scanned the tree line, but all I saw were those shadowy figures, inching closer, their eyes glowing faintly in the beam of my flashlight. I jumped back in the truck, locked the doors, and tried to start the engine again. This time, it roared to life, and I didn't hesitate. I slammed my foot on the gas, tearing down the road with those figures disappearing into the night behind me. That back road was never on the GPS again, and I never took another shortcut like it. Some parts of the highway are better left alone, forgotten for a reason. But that night, the highway taught me a lesson. No matter how much you try to control your route, sometimes the road controls you. And that's just another story from the endless highway, where every mile holds a secret and every shadow hides a story waiting to be told. Somewhere out there on that endless ribbon of highway, I found myself driving through a stretch that locals called the Devil's Bend. It was a notorious curve, known for claiming lives with its sharp turn and blind spots. I'd driven it plenty of times before, but one night things got real different. The road was slick from an unexpected rain, headlights reflecting off the wet asphalt like shards of broken glass. I was hauling a heavy load, the trailer's weight making every movement deliberate, slow. As I approached the bend, I saw something strange, a pair of glowing eyes just off the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a deer or some wild animal, but the eyes were too steady, too unblinking. My stomach tightened, and my hands gripped the wheel harder. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure standing by the guardrail, a man, tall, wearing an old leather jacket that looked like it belonged to a different era. He raised his hand, as if signaling me to stop, but something about him felt wrong. The air grew heavy and thick, like the weight of the world had settled around that curve. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching, and the truck came to a halt just inches from the man. I looked at him, and his face was pale, almost translucent, with eyes that seemed to swirl like a storm. "Don't trust the road ahead," he whispered, voice crackling like static. "Turn back while you still can." I blinked, and when I looked again, he was gone. No footprints, no signs he'd ever been there. The silence in the cab was suffocating. I looked down at the dashboard. Radio was dead, GPS gone blank, and the rain stopped as suddenly as it started, leaving an eerie stillness. The moment I tried to start driving again, the truck shuddered violently, lights flickering like a dying flame. My heart pounded as the radio crackled back to life, a voice whispering, "You can't escape the bend." I gunned the engine, tires spinning on wet asphalt, and barely made it through that curve without losing control. When I finally cleared the bend, the road opened into a quiet, moonlit stretch, but I couldn't shake the feeling I'd just been given a warning from something beyond understanding. That night, I learned the highway holds memories, not just of accidents and lost lives, but of warnings. Sometimes those warnings come wrapped in ghostly figures or strange voices on the radio. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to listen. The highway's stories aren't just about fear. They're about respect. Respect for the road, for the past, and for whatever waits in the shadows when you least expect it. And I'm here to tell you those stories, 1 mile at a time. After all the strange nights and shadowy encounters, I started to realize something important. The highway isn't just a place where scary things happen. It's a place where the past and present collide, where every mile holds a story of pain, hope, loss, and sometimes redemption. Those ghosts, those whispers on the radio, the figures that vanish when you blink, they're reminders that we're never truly alone on the road. One night, driving through a stretch of highway that had been quiet for months, I felt a presence beside me. Not threatening, but comforting. The air warmed, and the radio played a soft, familiar tune. Something my old man used to hum before he passed. It was like the highway was telling me it was okay, that all those spirits I'd met were just trying to reach out, to be heard, and maybe to find peace. I pulled over, stepped out, and looked up at the stars. The road behind me was dark, silent. But in that moment, I didn't feel fear. I felt connected to the stories, to the souls, to the endless stretch of highway that had become my life's journey. So here's my advice to anyone out there driving those lonely roads. Respect the highway. Listen to its stories, and never forget the lives that have traveled before you. Because every trucker has their tales, and every mile is a memory. Thanks for riding along with me. If you want more stories from the highway, true horror, strange encounters, and everything in between, I'll be here, ready to share. Safe travels. Friends, keep your lights on, your eyes open, and your heart steady. The highway never forgets.